I used to think there was no bond stronger than the one I had with my sister. If you'd told 17-year-old me that she'd be the reason my entire world collapsed, I would have laughed. But that's the thing about betrayal, you never see it coming from the people you trust most. My name's Jordan. I'm 33 now. But back then I was just some awkward teenager obsessed with fixing things: radios, old phones, busted speakers. If it had wires, I wanted to know how it worked. I wasn't exactly what you'd call social. My bedroom was my world. Soldering iron toolboxes and shelves of junkyard electronics. That room, it was more than just a workspace. It was my sanctuary. And then there was my little sister Lila, 4 years younger. Sharper than me in every way: straight A's, soccer captain, choir girl, parent-approved golden child. She had this bright energy that people instantly liked. Me, I blended into walls, but somehow we were tight. Lila would sit cross-legged on my carpet, watching me gut old radios, asking questions like, "What happens if you connect the red wire to the blue one?" I'd explain it the best I could, fumbling my way through, but she always listened like I was the smartest guy alive. She made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than just the family's disappointment. That made what happened next even harder to believe. See, we had this silent code. No matter what, we always had each other's backs. I'd lie to our parents when she snuck out. She'd cover for me when I missed curfew. We didn't even have to talk about it. It was just understood. Until she broke that code. I was 18, just barely out of high school. Lila had started to get attention from older guys. And like any protective brother, I didn't like it. Especially when this smug rich kid Zach kept trying to hang around. One day I saw him leaning into her locker like he owned the place, whispering something in her ear. I stepped in, told him to back off. Maybe I was a little too aggressive. Maybe I shoved him. Whatever. He left. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. That was when the whispers started. In the halls, online, about how weird it was that I always hovered around Lila, that I was too close. At first I brushed it off as high school drama, but then Lila stopped talking to me. One night I knocked on her door like I always did when she seemed upset. She didn't answer. Later I found her in the kitchen, red-eyed, staring into her cereal like it held all the answers. I tried to hug her. She flinched. That moment still plays in my head like a glitchy video on repeat. I backed off confused. "What's wrong, Lila?" She shook her head. "Nothing, I'm just tired." She was lying, but I didn't push it. I should have. The next morning, everything shattered. There was a knock on the door. Not casual, heavy, official, 2 cops, a woman in a gray blazer. My dad opened the door, and suddenly they were in our living room, sitting on the couch like they owned it. "Jordan, can we ask you some questions?" the woman said. "It's about your sister." I actually laughed because it sounded ridiculous. But when I looked at my dad, he wasn't laughing. He wasn't even breathing, just staring at me like I was a ghost. That's when I knew something was really wrong. The lady was from CPS. She said Lila had spoken to her school counselor. She claimed I had done things to her, sick things, claimed I used my room as a trap, that all my wires and zip ties weren't for electronics, that I locked the door not to protect my projects, but to hide what I was doing to her. I thought it was a joke, until I saw the way my dad looked at me, like I was filth, like I wasn't his son anymore. I tried to explain, showed them my workbench, half-finished projects, the tools, the books. I told them how Lila used to help me, how she'd sit with me for hours. They didn't care. They already had their narrative. "Did you ever tell Lila she was special?" the woman asked, pen poised over her little notepad. "She's my sister," I said. "Of course." She nodded like she'd just confirmed something dark. It spiraled from there. My protectiveness over Lila. Suddenly that was grooming. The time I pushed Zach, jealousy. Every kind gesture I ever showed her, manipulation. And Lila, she wouldn't even look at me. That's what broke me. I begged, pleaded, "Lila, tell them the truth." She mumbled something, then finally whispered, "I'm sorry, Jordan." That was it. That's when I realized she wasn't taking it back. She wasn't going to save me. She was going to let me drown. My dad didn't say a word on the way to the station, just gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him upright. That night my world collapsed. No arrest yet, just investigation. But everyone treated me like I was already guilty. My room was searched, photos were taken. I was interrogated for hours. And then came the worst part, the decision. They offered me a deal. No jail, my lawyer said. 5 years probation, lifetime registration. But you stay out of prison. I was innocent. But the system didn't care. My own parents didn't believe me. My public defender flat out told me juries believe crying teenage girls. You don't stand a chance. And so I signed. I signed my life away to a lie. That night, I sat in a tiny apartment a friend let me crash in, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what it felt like to be a brother, a son, a person. I couldn't. That version of me had died the moment Lila said, "I'm sorry." It's strange how fast everything changes. One day, you're someone's son, someone's brother. The next, you're a ghost with a name people whisper and won't say out loud. I lost more than my freedom when I signed that plea deal. I lost myself. The registry hit fast. One day I was just Jordan. The next, I was that guy, the one parents warned their kids about. I had to move out of state. Couldn't live within 500 feet of a school playground daycare. You don't realize how many places fall under that until it's too late. The first apartment I applied for. The leasing agent smiled until she saw my record. Her eyes went hard. She didn't even try to hide it. I'm sorry, this complex isn't a good fit. That became my life. Smiles until the system spoke for me. Then doors shut fast. I finally found a rundown studio in the bad part of town. Mold on the walls, roaches in the fridge. But it was mine. Sort of. As long as I didn't miss rent. No one asked questions. That was the best part. I worked temp jobs, warehouses, graveyard shifts, fast food. Whatever wouldn't run a background check too deep. It wasn't just the work that hurt, it was the way people looked at me when they found out. Like I might snap any second. Like they needed to watch their backs around me. But I still had my tools. Still had old speakers and boards I'd scavenged from dumpsters. I'd fix things in my room not because I had clients, because it was the only thing that made me feel human. That and the library. There was this tiny branch tucked behind an abandoned grocery store. Barely anyone went there, which is exactly why I did. It was quiet, safe. One librarian, Dana, must have figured me out pretty quick. But she never said a word. Just started putting books out that matched what I read, electronics coding hardware design. Never once looked at me sideways. That was the first kindness I'd felt in years. I'd spend hours there pretending I belonged somewhere. Sometimes I'd scroll through old photos on my cracked phone. Me and Lila, arm-in-arm faces, smeared with birthday cake. Her laughing on my handlebars. Her reading the instructions while I rewired a busted boombox. I'd stare at those pictures like they were someone else's life, because they were. About a year in, I tried dating. I don't know why. I think I just wanted to feel normal for 5 minutes. Her name was Clara. We met at a repair shop where I'd picked up some part-time work. She liked that I didn't talk too much, said it was refreshing. We had coffee. A second date. Things got easy, comfortable. Then she asked why I never invited her over. I told her the truth. Not everything, just the part that I was on the registry. That there'd been a misunderstanding in my past, but it wasn't what people thought. Her face froze, just enough for me to catch it before she smiled again. The next day, 2 guys showed up at my job. One of them called me a predator. The other threw my toolbox across the shop. I didn't fight back. I just walked out. I never saw Clara again. I stopped trying after that. Relationships, jobs, friends. It all crumbled as soon as my name came up in a search bar. So I disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally, spiritually, I shut off the parts of me that used to hope. I lived small, quiet. In the corners of life, no one cared to look. Years passed like that. And then one night, everything changed. It was a Thursday. I was working nights at a machine shop, still fixing radios on the side when I had time. That night, I got an email. Subject line, need to speak, urgent. Sender Frank Marston, licensed investigator. I thought it was spam, probably some scam. I almost deleted it. But something about it felt different. The way he wrote blunt, direct, like someone used to being ignored and didn't care. He said he'd been hired by someone named Blake Rowan. The name didn't ring a bell. But then I read further. Blake was Lila's husband. Yeah, she'd gotten married. And apparently Blake had started noticing things. Inconsistencies, gaps in her stories, mood swings, drinking, anxiety, late-night breakdowns. One night he found her crying with an old photo in her hand. A picture of us. She wouldn't explain. So he hired Frank to dig. What Frank found changed everything. He didn't write details in the email, just enough to say we should talk. You've been wronged, and I can prove it. I didn't believe him, couldn't. I'd spent too long being broken by hope, but I needed to know. We met at a diner 3 towns over. I picked the booth facing the door. Old habit. Frank showed up in a wrinkled jacket hair like it hadn't seen a comb in weeks, but his eyes were sharp, like he'd seen too much to be impressed by much else. He slid a manila folder across the table. This, he said, is the beginning of the end for her story. I opened it. There were transcripts, text messages, screenshots from Lila's old accounts, stuff she thought was deleted, conversations with friends talking about needing a distraction about how she couldn't risk getting caught with Zach again. Zach! The rich boy I'd pushed against his car. Turns out he and Lila weren't just flirting. They were together. And one night they got caught by a teacher, in his car, doing exactly what she didn't want our parents to know about. She panicked, thought I'd rat her out, so she flipped the script. Make Jordan the bad guy she'd written in one message. He's always alone with me anyway. People already think it's weird. Another one, they'll believe it. He's got no friends. They'll think he's messed up. Each message hit like a knife, but the worst was the letter, a signed confession. Handwritten. Frank said Blake had confronted her with all the evidence, that Lila broke down and told him everything. She wrote it all out. Every lie, every reason, every regret. I sat in that booth for 2 hours reading it over and over. Frank didn't say much, just kept the coffee coming. Finally, I looked up. Why me? I asked. Why would she go that far? Frank shrugged. People panic, and then they double down. And once you're in deep enough, the lie becomes easier than the truth. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because I knew he was right. The next day, I called a real lawyer. Not the public defender I'd been stuck with a decade ago. A real one. And I handed her the folder. Her eyes got wide, then sharp. We're getting your name back, she said. And for the first time in 10 years, I believed her. I always thought that proving my innocence would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like grief. Grief for a life I never got to live. For the version of me that was erased the moment my sister chose fear over family. But I wasn't chasing a feeling anymore. I was chasing the truth. And for once, it wasn't running from me. The lawyer I hired, Elena, didn't waste time. She moved through the paperwork like someone who'd seen too many people like me forgotten, buried under false stories in lazy courtrooms. We'll file for post-conviction relief, she said. New evidence. Signed confession. Contradictions in the original timeline. It's strong, Jordan. I wanted to believe that. I did. But after 10 years of being the villain in everyone's story, hope was a risky emotion. Do you think I'll get off the registry? I asked. She didn't answer right away, just looked at the confession again, then met my eyes. I think we have a shot, but it won't be easy. She was right. The process moved slow, painfully slow. Every step felt like dragging a boulder uphill with one hand tied behind my back. We filed, we waited, we argued motions, more waiting. And then came the day I had to walk back into a courtroom. I hadn't seen one since I was 18. Back then, I was a scared kid sitting behind a lawyer who didn't believe me, while my father glared at me like I'd killed someone. No one sat on my side of the aisle. Lila had the whole row to herself, crying, shaking, convincing. And now, 10 years later, I still walked in alone. Elena handled the legal side, but I still had to be there. Still had to sit through it all again. The judge, older now, gave me a long, unreadable look. Like maybe he remembered my case, maybe not. Maybe I was just another file. Frank was there too, sat in the back, arms crossed, watching everything. I'd come to rely on his presence more than I realized. He didn't talk much, didn't offer comfort, but he was steady, grounded, and in a life that had been ripped out from under me that meant something. Elena presented everything: Lila's confession, the message logs, the mismatched school records, even Zach's old statements, which now read more like cover stories than evidence. The state pushed back hard. They tried to argue that Lila had been pressured to confess, that the original claim was still valid even if her memory had evolved. But Elena wasn't having it. She didn't evolve, she snapped. She lied. Then she admitted she lied. And your case hung a man for it. The judge asked for time, said he needed to review. And so we waited again. Weeks passed, then months. I started working again. A better job this time, hardware support for a small security tech company that didn't run full background checks unless the police showed up. I kept quiet, showed up early, left late, lived small but not invisible. Then one morning my phone buzzed. Call from Elena. I stepped out back, hands shaking. "You ready?" she said. "Yeah." "It's over. The judge signed the order. Your record is expunged. You're off the registry." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Not because I wasn't happy, but because I didn't know how to feel. For years, I'd carried that label like a second skin. I'd learned how to shrink myself inside it, how to survive under it, and now suddenly it was gone. Who was I without it? Elena said something else, but I barely heard her. I sat on the curb behind the building and just breathed. Really breathed. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't waiting for the world to crush me. I was standing in it, whole. And then the letter came. No return address, just my name. Inside was my father's handwriting. He still used that stiff, slanted print like he was afraid of being messy. Like emotions could be kept in line if your pen never strayed. It started simple. "Jordan, we heard," Lila told us. My chest tightened. I kept reading. "She's not well. We didn't know the full story. We want to talk." Tucked inside was a check. $50,000. I laughed, out loud, in my kitchen. Like it was a bad sitcom and the punchline finally landed. 50 grand. Like that could buy back 10 years. Like that could patch the holes where my life used to be. I didn't cash it. Didn't tear it up either. Just stuck it in a drawer next to all the other things I didn't ask for. But I wasn't done yet. I called Frank, told him I wanted to talk to Blake. He was the reason this even started unraveling. He deserved to know everything. Frank gave me the number. I called that night. "Hello," Blake's voice was cautious, tired. "Blake, it's Jordan." Silence. "Lila's brother." A pause, then a quiet. "She never mentioned you." I wasn't surprised. Yeah, that tracks. He didn't say anything, so I continued. "You saved my life, man. You didn't know it, but you did." Blake exhaled slowly. "I don't even know who I'm married to anymore." "She's not who she pretended to be," I said. "But that's your story now, not mine." There was a long pause before he replied. "I filed for divorce." I nodded. "Good." We didn't say much after that, but before I hung up, he said something that stuck with me. "You didn't deserve any of this. I'm sorry." I didn't need his apology, but I appreciated it because it was the first real one I'd gotten. The next day, I deactivated my old email, shut down the phone number I'd had since I was a teenager, got a new apartment, small but clean, a place with no ghosts in the walls. I started a repair business. Just me, a small table, and a sign in the window that said, "I fix broken things." Funny how fitting that felt. I didn't think about Lila. Not often. When I did, it wasn't with hate. It was something colder, distance. Because I'd finally learned something most people never do. Sometimes forgiveness isn't about letting go. It's about deciding who never gets to touch you again. The strange thing about closure is that people think it comes with a grand moment, a breakthrough, a hug, maybe tears and apologies. But real closure is quieter. It's a slow, aching shift, the kind that starts when you realize you're no longer waiting for someone to do the right thing. They won't, and that's the point. A week after I spoke to Blake, another envelope arrived. Same stiff handwriting, no return address. I didn't open it right away. I sat with it on my kitchen table for a full day, just staring at it like maybe the paper would answer for the years it stole from me. Finally, I tore it open. It was from my parents. Inside was a letter from my mother this time. Her words were messier than my father's, written in that hurried emotional scrawl I remembered from birthday cards and grocery lists. "Jordan, we are sorry. We believed the wrong person." She wrote that Lila had confessed partially, that she'd admitted to lying, but framed it as a teenage mistake born from panic and confusion. She was scared, my mom wrote. She thought you were going to ruin her future, and she didn't know what else to do. Scared. She destroyed my life. They wanted to meet, to talk, to make things right, as if a conversation could patch a decade's worth of absence. As if they hadn't stood by while I was carted off silent as stones loyal only to the lie. Still, I said yes. Not because I wanted reconciliation, because I needed them to see what they'd done. I needed them to look me in the eyes and feel it. We met at a neutral spot, some little diner halfway between our towns. The kind of place with chipped mugs and sticky tables that hasn't changed since 1982. I got there early. They showed up late. When my mother walked in, Her face crumpled the moment she saw me. She reached out like she meant to hug me, but I stepped back. Her hand hovered in the air, then dropped to her side. My father looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but spiritually. The man who used to fill a room with his presence now looked like someone who had been hollowed out and left standing. We sat. They stumbled over pleasantries, asked about my health, my work. I didn't offer much, just one-word answers. I wasn't there to make them comfortable. Eventually, my mom cleared her throat. She told us everything she said. I raised an eyebrow, everything. She hesitated. Well, not all the details. Just that she made a mistake, that she lied, that she didn't think it would go as far as it did. I leaned forward, and you believed her again? She flinched. My father stayed quiet. I pulled out the folder Frank had given me. The confession, the texts, the plan Lila wrote out in her own words. I didn't say anything. Just let them read it. I watched my mother's face fall, watched my father's hands tremble as he flipped through the pages. When they finished, they looked up like they didn't know who I was, like the boy they'd raised was a stranger. You let her do this to me, I said, voice low, and you let them take me without a second thought. My mom started crying. We were trying to protect her, she said, voice cracking. We thought if it was true, we had to act fast. I nodded slowly. But you never asked, not once. You never looked at me and said, Jordan, is this true? You just assumed the worst. My father finally spoke. We failed you, he said, simple, direct, there's no excuse. There wasn't. But I still asked. Why? Why was it so easy to believe the worst about me? Neither of them answered right away. Then my mom said, because she was always the good one, and you were different. That landed like a punch, different. That word held years of meaning. Not criminal, not broken, just different, quiet, withdrawn, obsessive about my electronics, closed off, not easy to parent. And in their eyes, that had become suspicion. I looked at my father. You didn't even come to the hearing. His jaw tightened. I couldn't look at you. You mean you didn't want to, I corrected. He didn't argue. My mom wiped her eyes with a crumpled napkin. We can't change what happened, Jordan. But we want to try to rebuild. To be a family again. A family. I thought about all the nights I slept in my car, the jobs I lost, the people who treated me like a monster, the birthdays I spent alone, the silence, the shame. And they thought we could just rewind. I'm not angry anymore, I said. Not the way I used to be. My mom looked hopeful. But I don't forgive you. Her face fell. You see, I continued. Forgiveness means I believe you won't do it again. That I trust you to protect me if something like this ever happened again. And I don't. My father leaned back like the air had been knocked out of him. You lost that, right? Silence sat heavy at the table. Neither of them could meet my eyes now. I stood up. I'm glad she told you. I'm glad you know. But this doesn't end with hugs and healing. It ends with truth. And now you have it. I walked out without looking back, because there was nothing left to see. Weeks passed. Then came the final blow to Lila's perfect world. Blake filed for full custody of their kid, used the confession as proof of her instability. The court agreed. Her teaching job, gone. Turns out the school board doesn't take kindly to faculty who fabricate abuse stories. Her friends scattered. Most of them ghosted her. Some even reached out to me with awkward, too-late apologies. I didn't respond. Let her sit with the silence. I found out she made one last social media post before deleting everything. A long apology. Sort of. She said her memory was flawed, that she didn't understand the consequences at the time. She made herself the victim of her own lie. Classic. But the public didn't buy it. People dug up the court filings, the texts. Her story unraveled like cheap thread. What she had left was a mess of her own making. And me? I kept building. Business picked up. Word of mouth spread. People liked the guy who could fix things others gave up on. They didn't know my name beyond a receipt, and I liked it that way. For the first time, I was something more than what had been done to me. Then one more letter arrived. No return address. The envelope was small, inside a single sheet of paper. Lila's handwriting. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. No explanations, no excuses. Just that. I read it once. Then I folded it in half and placed it at the bottom of a drawer I never opened. And I never wrote back. Because sometimes peace isn't found in words. It's found in knowing the person who broke you will never break you again. There's a moment that comes after everything breaks, after the storm, after the screaming, after the silence. It's not relief, it's not even joy, it's space. And in that space, you get to ask the question that matters most. Now what? I didn't have an answer at first. I'd spent so long surviving that I didn't remember what living felt like. But I knew one thing: I was done letting the past steer the wheel. So I started small. I threw away the old mattress I'd been dragging from place to place for years. Got a new one, nothing fancy, just firm enough to hold a body that finally wanted rest. I painted my apartment walls white, bought new light bulbs, the kind that didn't flicker like haunted memories. I changed my number again, closed all my old accounts, deleted photos I'd clung to like anchors. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need to keep proving to myself who I used to be. I knew who I was now. The business grew. At first, it was just me, a folding table, and a sign in the window. But word spread. People brought in old stereos, retro game consoles, radios that hadn't worked since the 90s. I fixed them all, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. It felt good to bring broken things back to life. One day, a teenager came in with a vintage Walkman and a box of tangled wires. "You think you can fix this?" he asked. I smiled. "Let's find out." I'll find out. His name was Milo. 15, sharp as a tack, curious about everything. Reminded me of me before it all went sideways. He started hanging around watching me work, asking questions, taking notes. I didn't say no. I taught him everything I knew: how to read schematics, how to hold a soldering iron, how to tell the difference between something worth saving and something that only looked broken. He called me coach. I let him, because I think somewhere deep down, I needed to be something good in someone's life again. On Sundays, I started going for walks. Nothing profound, just a slow stroll through the neighborhood. No destination, no reason, just the quiet rhythm of shoes on pavement and the sun warming the back of my neck. Sometimes I'd stop at the park, watch families, kids racing around, parents half watching, half scrolling on their phones. I didn't feel anger anymore or jealousy, just distance, the kind that doesn't ache anymore. I'd sit on the bench and eat a sandwich, watch the wind shake the leaves loose, watch the world go on. And that was enough. One day, Dana from the library stopped by the shop. She looked the same soft eyes, same calm voice. "I've been hearing good things," she said, eyeing the shelves lined with fixed gadgets. I nodded. Things finally make sense. She smiled. "You always had that in you, just needed space to grow." She left a book on the counter. Something about sustainable electronics. "For the next generation," she said with a wink, glancing at Milo. Funny how the people who see you are rarely the ones you're born to. A few months later, my father called. I didn't answer. Let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave a message, and that told me everything I needed to know. Forgiveness isn't something you owe people just because they're family. Sometimes it's something you give yourself. Because holding on to anger is just another way of letting them live inside your head. I'd already moved out of that house a long time ago. No need to keep rebuilding its rooms in my mind. Blake sent me a photo around that same time. Just a simple picture, him and his kid at a pumpkin patch, both smiling, happy. He wrote, "Thanks for setting things right. We're okay now." I didn't reply. I just saved the photo. It was good to know someone got something good out of all this. That maybe the story didn't end in ash for everyone. Sometimes surviving means letting someone else build something better from the pieces. I saw Lila once. It wasn't planned. I was walking out of a hardware store with a new set of screwdrivers when she walked past me. We locked eyes. She stopped. So did I. She looked smaller, older, like life had folded her in on herself. Her hair was pulled back, face tired, no makeup, just raw, real. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, then closed it. I nodded once, then walked away. I didn't need to hear it. Didn't need to see the tears. I didn't need to rescue her from the fire she lit herself. Some lessons aren't for me to teach. She has to sit in that truth the same way I sat in the consequences. Alone. That night I got home, turned off the lights, and sat in the quiet. I thought about the boy I used to be. The one who locked his door to feel safe. The one who thought loyalty would always be returned. The one who believed his family would stand by him no matter what. He's gone, but I'm still here. And for the first time, that feels like enough. The seasons changed. Fall gave way to winter, then to spring. The repair shop became a real business. Milo started helping full-time. We got a second workbench. People brought in broken things and left with pieces of their childhood working again. Sometimes someone would ask me how I got into fixing electronics. I'd just shrug. I like fixing what people give up on. They'd smile, think it was just a line. But I meant every word. Because I know what it's like to be given up on. And I know what it takes to come back. Not with fire, not with revenge, but with quiet, steady hands. And the belief that even broken things deserve a second chance. There are things you don't realize you're carrying until they're gone. The weight of needing to explain yourself. The ache of waiting for someone to say I was wrong. The silent war between who you were and who they told you to be. I carried those things for over a decade. And then slowly, without fanfare or fireworks, I set them down. No ceremony, no final confrontation. Just quiet, the kind you earn. It had been almost a year since the court cleared my name. A year since the apology letter I never answered. Since my parents tried to play family again, with a check they thought could fix what they broke. I hadn't spoken to them since that diner. I hadn't seen Lila since the sidewalk, and I was fine with that. Some stories don't need sequels, they just need endings. My shop had changed, not just in size, but in spirit. We'd expanded into the unit next door, more shelves, more tools, more room to breathe. Milo ran the front desk now. I trusted him. He'd grown into the role with this natural confidence, like the work shaped him into something solid. We were starting to get attention. Local newspapers, community blogs. One guy called me the wire whisperer. I laughed so hard I nearly short-circuited a capacitor. But what stuck with me most were the people. A grandmother who brought in her late husband's cassette deck crying when she heard his old mixtapes again. A couple who salvaged their wedding video after we restored their ancient camcorder. A teenager who found her dad's Game Boy and wanted to surprise him with it working again. These weren't just repairs. They were second chances. And maybe that's why I stayed in this line of work. Not because I loved electronics, but because I finally understood what it meant to bring something back from the edge. I wasn't just fixing things. I was reclaiming something, piece by piece. Then one afternoon, Milo brought in a letter. No name, no return address, again. He handed it to me without saying anything, just nodded like he knew. I took it to the back room, sat down, opened it slowly like peeling back a scar. It was from my mother. This time it was short. We know you're building a life without us. We respect that. We just want you to know we're proud of you, no matter how long it took us to get here. No check, no invitation. Just those words. For the first time, I didn't feel angry or bitter. I felt free, because it didn't matter if they were proud of me. I was proud of me. I folded the letter, placed it on the shelf beside a dusty photo of my younger self, back when my biggest worry was which wire to solder first. That boy didn't know what was coming, but I did right by him, and that's enough. Later that week, Milo asked me why I never talk about my family. I looked up from the circuit board I was soldering. They were part of the story I said. But they're not the whole story. He nodded, didn't press. Sometimes the most respectful thing someone can do is not ask for more than you're willing to give. I still get nights where I can't sleep. Sometimes the old memories knock at the door, the cold bench at the police station, my father's EAs when he wouldn't meet mine, Lila's voice saying, "I'm sorry," like it made the lie any less real. But they don't stay long. Now I open the window, let the breeze in, remind myself where I am, what I've built. I walk around the apartment, flipping light switches on and off, listening to the hum of working systems. That sound used to mean safety. Now it means control, not over the world, but over myself. People ask if I ever think about reconnecting. With my parents, with Lila, I don't. Not out of spite, just because the road I'm walking doesn't lead backward. I found other family in small ways. Dana from the library, who still checks in every few weeks. Blake, who sent me a voice message of his kid saying thank you for the Game Boy. Milo, who now calls me before he makes a single wiring decision. And me. I found myself. I didn't realize how lost I was until I stopped trying to be who they needed and started being who I am. Quiet, focused, whole. Some days, I drive past the neighborhood where I grew up. I don't stop, but I slow down. I let the past roll by my window like an old film I've watched enough times to know the ending. I nod at the house, at the cracked sidewalk, at the porch where Lila once waited up for me. Then I drive on, because that's what healed people do. They don't burn bridges, they just stop crossing them. Years from now, if someone tells my story, I hope they don't say it was about revenge. It wasn't. It was about truth, about reclaiming something sacred, about showing up for the version of me that nobody else defended. And most of all, it was about making something beautiful from the broken. Not because I had to, but because I could. Story 2. I canceled everything because my fiancé and her bridesmaids were planning to make fun of me during our wedding in secret. And what followed permanently damaged her reputation. Amy, a 27-year-old woman, and I, a 28-year-old man, were set to tie the knot last week. In all honesty, I'm still attempting to comprehend what transpired. After 4 years of dating, I genuinely believe she was my soul match. At my friend's barbecue, I got to know Amy. She was an extremely gregarious girl who could brighten whatever space she entered. To be honest, she was much over my capabilities. Beautiful, intelligent, and capable of making everyone laugh. In fact, our first date was hilarious. In an attempt to impress her, I went her to a posh restaurant, but our reservation was ruined. She recommended that we buy hot dogs from a street seller and eat them in the park rather than becoming upset. I realized then that she was unique. It was fantastic for the first 3 years. Similar to the type of connection you see in those corny blogs about our relationships when everyone accuses us of being too ideal. When things got difficult, she was there for me no matter what. Amy took care of everything when my grandpa passed away last year. She made sure I phoned my job to arrange for time off and even arranged all the family belongings so I could simply concentrate on my grief. When I had important meetings at work, she would slip little messages in my lunch. She knew I missed home-cooked meals, so she even learned how to prepare my mom's lasagna recipe. Additionally, Amy was a lot of fun to be around. On these sporadic adventure days, we would simply drive there without making any plans. She taught me to appreciate life more and to quit being so serious all the time. She always added joy to our gaming nights, which is why my friends adored her. Though she never said it, I could tell that my sister and Amy didn't get along. However, it wasn't a problem until around 6 months ago when things began to change. At start, it was little matters. She began to mention her ex-boyfriend Tom more and more as if she were watching TV, and she would remark at random, "Oh, Tom loved this show." Or Tom would never be able to comprehend such shows. He was quite simple. I didn't give it much thought at first. Everyone occasionally discusses their ex-partners, don't they? Then she began to make her prank worse. It used to be enjoyable jokes and pranks that we both laughed at, but Amy always enjoyed them. Such like this. Before a significant meeting, she once changed all of my socks to bright pink ones. She knew I had these shoes that no one would ever see, so it was humorous. Recently, however, her joke began to feel different. I mean, rather than being as thrilled about my victories as she used to be, I was nearly thrilled when I received this enormous promotion that I had been aiming for 2 years. She spoke at my party in this strange way. In front of my parents' employer and coworkers, she stood there and said that I was probably simply lucky and that my boss felt sorry for me. As she chuckled, everyone simply stood there, looking uncomfortable. That is not what the previous Amy would have done. She was my biggest supporter once. The proposal is when I first became aware that anything was wrong. I had saved money for this upscale restaurant, planned it for months, bought her favorite flowers, and even had the restaurant assist set up this special dessert with the ring. She spent 5 minutes pretending she didn't want to marry me when I proposed. I just sat there thinking, oh, I'm not sure, when we were the center of attention in the restaurant. She laughed and said it was only a joke, until she eventually said yes. Something didn't feel right. The previous Amy would have agreed for a little moment, but she would never have allowed me to sit there for so long, feeling foolish. Looking back now is strange. Her spontaneity, sense of humor, and extroverted nature are all qualities that I used to like about her. She began to feel different, as though her actions were now motivated more by attention or amusement from others than by making us both happy. Whenever I attempted to discuss how her recent pranks were making me feel, she would just respond, "OMG, darling." Be able to accept a joke. Or what's causing your sensitivity? Amy, in the past, would have paid attention. In the past, we could discuss anything. My best buddy also began to notice the shift. "Dude, is Amy okay?" he would remark. "Her behavior has changed." But since I thought about how wonderful things used to be, I continued coming up with excuses. Perhaps she was simply anxious about the wedding, her job, or anything else I kept telling myself. The Amy with whom I fell in love was a wonderful, kind individual who inspired me to improve myself. When I was having a rough day, she would surprise me with my favorite munchies. Do you recall the weird things I described months ago that always made me chuckle when I was feeling low? That's why I didn't realize things were changing for so long. You don't want to see the negative aspects of someone you love so much. But the changes continued, Guy. Now that I'm looking back, I can see these warning signs appearing one after the other. It's similar to viewing a game replay in which the conclusion is already known. When you're in the midst of it, you just hope that things will return to normal, even if all the warning flags are suddenly so clear. In any case, things became somewhat strange around 2 months before to the wedding. It's that strange feeling when you know something is off but are unable to identify it. Amy began discussing her former partner. I'll refer to him as Tom, much more than normal. She would constantly bring him up in ways that were a backhanded praise. For example, she would say, "This is why you're so much better than Tom," when I told her about this new project at work at our meal. He was hardly able to do simple math. Here you are, overseeing initiatives worth millions of dollars. Or I would be looking at the nutrition labels while we were grocery shopping, trying to eat healthily, etc. "Tom never cared about this stuff," she would say. "He simply took whatever was the least expensive." He was quite straightforward. It began occurring more and more, and at first I thought maybe she was simply trying to cheer me up or something. She'd add, "Tom would never watch stuff like this," when we were watching a space documentary or something. For him, it was too difficult. He spent the entire day watching sports. But it was strange the way she stated it, as if she had forgotten how easy he was. Then I saw that she was constantly on her phone, even when she was watching TV and eating supper. She would receive these texts and quickly put her phone away if I passed by, even as we were attempting to arrange the wedding. Even though I'm not normally jealous, something didn't feel right. Her phone flashed up while she slept off on the couch one evening while watching a movie. That was all it took, even though it was only for a moment. "Tom," I felt sick to my stomach. The screen flickered over the preview of the message. "Before I depart, I can't wait to see you tomorrow." Every element, including how his name appeared so nonchalantly on her computer, caught my attention. While we were engaged, how could she still have his number? The tiny innocuous emoji suddenly has a lot of importance. I was reluctant to unload. I made an effort to breathe and convince myself that it might not be malicious. Perhaps she was simply running into an old acquaintance. Perhaps it had to do with the wedding, but my gut told me something my intellect wouldn't believe. I began to pay more attention after that. How long was she gone, and where did she go? The few discrepancies in her account. Something wasn't adding up, even though she said that she had several meetings with her bridesmaids to organize the wedding. I made the decision to follow her one day. Like some obsessive boyfriend in a terrible movie, I felt like a fool for doing it. But I had to know. I had to check it myself. She parked her car in front of a coffee shop downtown and went inside. No wedding coordinators or bridesmaids. Only him. At a table by the window, Tom was already there waiting for her. I remained outdoors standing like a shadow in the darkness near a lamppost. As I watched them, my heart thumped in my ears. They weren't only conversing, they were doing more than catching up. They appeared at ease, known, like two historical figures, as if they had been doing this for some time. She dipped her head in the manner she usually did when flirting, twisted a lock of hair around her finger, and flashed that simple personal smile that was once just for me when she laughed at anything he said. My hands were clenched into fists as I felt ill. I had the want to storm through the door and confront her in front of everyone, but I was unable to breathe or move. Like some fool who didn't see this coming, I just stood there and watched through the window, thinking he was marrying the love of his life, when in fact she was already slipping away. I stayed out of her way when she returned. I wanted to see how far this would go, but perhaps I should have. I observed more throughout the course of the following several weeks. She would pretend to be out dress shopping with her mother, but her mother would contact me to inquire about the specifics of the wedding. At the same time, she claimed to have late meetings at work. Her coworker with whom I am acquainted pointed out that she had left early that day. Even her bridesmaids were behaving strangely. Every time something related to the wedding comes up, they give me these glances as if they knew something I didn't. When I pass by, they would be whispering and then quickly stop. Everyone but one of her pals. I'll refer to her as Jen. She works at my firm and is a modest bridesmaid. When the other bridesmaids were laughing over something, she constantly looked awkward. I recall Amy complaining that Tom could never afford a property like this when we were at the wedding location making some preparations. She had this strange tone, as if she found it endearing, even though he was still living in his college apartment with roommates. "That's why you're so much better, babe," she added, glancing at me. "You're genuinely ambitious." Tom was pretty plain. However, her speech was straightforward. She seemed to be recalling a pleasant memory. That day, Jen drew me aside with a concerned expression. She began to suggest something along the lines of, "Look, you should do this." However, Jen quickly left when Amy returned at that very moment. When I heard Amy talking on the phone in our backyard, it was the last straw. She assumed I was at work, but I had a headache and had gone home early. "Yeah, he has no idea," she remarked, giggling at something. "He believes I'm at meetings to arrange a wedding." Then she quickly hung up after catching a glimpse of me through the glass. Tried to act as though she was discussing a surprise for me with her sister. At that moment, I realized our relationship was ended. Prior to any of the wedding-related events, I was aware of her foolish prank intentions and understood exactly what was happening with her and Tom. I was aware that we were over. The trust simply vanished. Here's the problem, though. I remained silent. I wanted to see what she had planned call me petty. All of these private meetings, strange remarks about Tom and giddy bridesmaids. There was an impending event, and I sensed that it would be something significant because Amy loves pulling practical jokes. I simply didn't anticipate it to be that way. In hindsight, perhaps I ought to have simply addressed her. Perhaps I ought to have canceled the wedding at that time. However, I'm actually relieved that I didn't. Thus, I found myself waiting in my car outside the coffee shop where Amy was meeting Tom once more approximately 3 weeks before to the wedding. And I simply knew that I had to take action. Normally, I'm not the kind to make plans. To be honest, Amy was usually the one who planned everything in our relationship. But I had a gut feeling that I needed help. I gave my friend Mike a call. These days, Mike works as a corporate lawyer and is always narrating bizarre tales about divorce cases. He has contributed. We attended college together, and he has direct experience with Amy's antics. For example, at his birthday party, she embarrassed him in front of his whole legal office by pretending to be a singing Telegram user. After that, he never really liked her. So I saw Amy chuckle at whatever Tom was saying and called him. "I need your aid, dude. Amy is probably planning something for the wedding, and I don't think it will work out." After a minute of silence, Mike said, "Come to my office now." I will always remember sitting in his opulent office and listening to everything he had to say. After I was done, he gave me a serious look and said, "We need insurance." After that, he took out this legal pad and began writing. "Look," he said, "I can't stop her from doing whatever she's planning, but if she does try anything, we can make sure she regrets it." We drafted this utterly phony prenuptial agreement in his office for about 4 hours. Although it looks very official, Mike claimed it wouldn't stand up in court for even 5 minutes. Contained a lot of legal jargon that I couldn't even comprehend. This particular provision regarding public humiliation was crucial. On my phone, I still have a picture of it. All jointly arranged financial commitments shall be instantly void, and the offending party will be required to publicly apologize if either party intentionally embarrasses or degrades the other party in public prior to the signing of this contract. In order to make it appear like one of those 50-page contracts that no one ever reads, Mike even included some fictitious case law references, along with all these intricate definitions of what constitutes financial responsibility and public humiliation, the finest aspect. To make it appear more official, he had his secretary notarize it and place this official-looking stamp on it. Amy would simply sign anything that was placed in front of her. She also acknowledged that she had never read the contract for her own apartment. She wouldn't be able to tell it was phony, Mike remarked. I gave the prenuptial agreement to my best man Dan to keep in this black folder. just in case I advised him to carry it with him to the wedding. I felt somewhat bad because Dan, who has known me since we were children, could sense how anxious I was the entire time we were doing this, even if he thought I was being paranoid. As if I could have gone too far. Perhaps I was simply being suspicious. However, I would recall that Amy continued to see Tom behind my back, to lie about her plans, and to act strangely among her bridesmaids. And unless anything came up at the wedding, I had no intention of using it. One day, my coworker Jen, who was a bridesmaid, showed up at my workplace looking quite anxious. She began to talk about how she was unable to remain silent any longer. Amy, however, made a phone call at that very time. Jen's expression at seeing Amy's name appear. Whatever was coming, I knew it was bad. Additionally, I began to notice more things about the house. In the bathroom while the shower was running, Amy began making these lengthy phone calls. She quickly shut down her laptop. She was erasing text messages while she thought I was sleeping, according to the one occasion I entered the room. The strange part was that she occasionally showed additional kindness as well. For example, suggesting that we watch my favorite movies, or bringing home my favorite takeaway at random. In hindsight, I believe she was experiencing guilt. Or perhaps she was only attempting to confuse me. I'm not sure. I recall sitting at my parents' house the night before the wedding. Amy requested that we avoid meeting one another before to the wedding. There was a part of me that hoped I would never have to utilize the black folder with the prenuptial agreement, as if I were mistaken about everything. Perhaps Amy was only preparing a ridiculous surprise. I was glancing at the binder when my mother came in. She could sense something wasn't right, but she didn't know what was in it. "You know, if you're not sure, you don't have to go through with this," she remarked as she sat down next to me. I just assured her that everything was well. That evening, I instructed Dan to keep the folder near throughout the ceremony and placed it in his luggage. Neither of us was laughing when he joked that it was like in the movies when someone always objections at the wedding. I kept thinking about the folder while I was getting dressed the following morning, hoping I would need it, but yet felt strangely at ease knowing it was there in case. In fact, the wedding morning was ideal, as in strangely ideal. Everything about the location was stunning. Amy made sure every decoration was just the way she wanted it. I kept wondering that perhaps I was mistaken about everything when I was getting ready with my groomsmen. Perhaps I was simply being suspicious. My best man Dan was constantly examining the folder as if it were his job. Every few minutes he would check on his suitcase to make sure it was still there. He was so scared that my other guys were making fun of him, assuming he was looking for the rings. Even before the ceremony began, my mother was in tears. Happy tears, she thought. My tie was good, but my dad kept straightening it. In hindsight, I believe they both recognized something was wrong, but chose not to speak out. I recall seeing everyone take their seats while I stood at the altar. Amy's bridesmaids were whispering to one another and laughing. Everyone except Jen, who appeared to be on the verge of vomiting. She refused to give me a glance. Everyone sprang to their feet as soon as the music began to play. To be honest, Amy looked stunning as she and her father entered. Actually, everything was flawless, which only made the subsequent events worse. The ceremony began as usual. The priest went about his business, discussing commitment, love, and other such topics. In fact, I was beginning to feel foolish about carrying that prenuptial agreement in Dan's suitcase. Then just before we were to exchange vows, we reached the vows. Amy did something where she took the priest's microphone. He was really perplexed, but she simply smiled broadly and told him not to worry. Then, as if presenting a game show or something, she says, beaming, "I have a small surprise planned for my amazing soon-to-be hubby." My stomach fell. Dan quickly placed his hand on the folder in his backpack. My dad straightened up in his chair, and I noticed it. With a broad smile, Amy turns to address each of our visitors and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the true love of my life." As if he were in a movie or something, the guy Tom enters the venue through the open doors at the rear, while everyone is turning around in their seats, trying to figure out what's going on. He's just walking down the aisle with this dumb smile on his face. You could hear my mother's gasp from the other side of the room. In fact, my sister got to her feet as if she were about to fight. "Oh no," quite loudly exclaimed one of my aunts. Amy wasn't finished though. She is grinning as if she had just received a prize or something. And she begins to talk about how she couldn't say "I do" without first getting Tom's approval, because he played such a significant role in her life. And they had been chatting a lot recently. Then, like we're pals or something. This moron named Tom approaches the altar and gives me a back pat. I wanted to knock him out for the smile he's wearing. The majority of the bridesmaids are laughing as if this is the most hilarious thing they have ever witnessed. The priests seem to wish to vanish. Now Jen is truly weeping with tears streaming down her cheeks. Amy wasn't finished though, not even close. "Oh, and I have something else to show everyone," she says, taking out her phone. She began looking through her bridesmaids' group chat. "Look," she adds, pointing to her screen, "babe. This tiny pool has been in use. I've started placing bets with the females. I swear that for a moment when I was reading these texts, my brain simply stopped functioning. These females, who were meant to assist Amy in organizing our wedding, had been placing real bets on her ability to carry it out. Before the ceremony, one of her bridesmaids had wagered $200 that Amy would pretend to change her mind. I sobbed at the altar as someone had $150 on me. Lisa had placed a $300 wager that Amy would do something spectacular. In other words, they were betting on a football game rather than a wedding, and they had a complete spreadsheet with odds and everything. The life of someone. The worst thing, messages from months ago were among them. This was not an impromptu joke. This had been months in the making. All those meetings to organize the wedding. Most likely they were scheming ways to make me seem bad while they sat about. Amy giggling and pointed out various bets while she scrolled through the thread. "Rachel nearly got it right, you see. I'll bring a surprise guest," she said. "Isn't that close enough to qualify Tom?" He's still there laughing. Like this is the greatest thing he's ever seen while glancing at the phone over Amy's shoulder. "You really went all out for this one man," he adds. Some of the visitors begin murmuring as I glance around the room. Naturally, people are documenting this as I can see phones come out. It's likely that this will be shared on social media within 5 minutes. Amy is waiting for me to chuckle while she stands there in her immaculate white dress. I meant to dismiss this as simply another one of her tricks, as if she hadn't just ruined our connection between us in front of everyone we knew. She prods me in the side and says, "Come on, babe. You're not angry, are you? It's only a joke." Unless she glances at Tom and they both start laughing again. Tom isn't really going to protest or anything. When I look at Dan, he has already taken the folder out of his backpack halfway, but Amy hasn't finished yet. "Oh, should I tell them about the backup plan?" she asks, turning to face the visitors, in case he did become angry. I realized then that this was more than a mischievous joke. Amy wasn't just being herself here. This was blatantly harsh. She had been preparing how to make me seem bad in front of everyone I cared about for months. Her pals, her ex, and most likely half of the others in this room were all participating. I turned to face her as she stood there beaming with pride. Additionally, I no longer saw the girl with whom I had fallen in love. I came into someone who believed my emotions were a farce. Someone who prefers to be laughed at rather than loved. At that point, I made the decision to give her a show if she wanted to. I gave her the most composed grin I've ever had in my life. In fact, she returned the smile, presumably believing that I was finally cracking the joke. I looked at the priest, who, to be honest, seemed like he wanted to quit the church right then. I say that very respectfully. "Is that table ready for us to sign the marriage license I have to quickly get something?" The priest simply gestures toward the small table off to the side, presumably fearing that I'm going to make things worse. I approach Dan. Everyone seems to be holding their breath, since the room is suddenly very quiet. Amy is still grinning broadly, but it's clear that she's becoming perplexed. Her script did not call for this. Mike helped me prepare this black folder, which I take out. It seems really official. I raise it for everyone to see. I say this in my finest meeting presentation voice, ladies and gentlemen. I want to share a paper with my beloved fiancé before we proceed. Amy's head tilts like a dog in confusion. Hold on while I make my way back toward the altar. I'm taking my sweet time. I'm not even shaking my hands. I'm just prepared. See Amy. I say this quite calmly, as if I were speaking to a child. Before the wedding, I had a little agreement drafted by my lawyer. Just in case you ever made the decision to do anything similar. In order for everyone to see the official-looking stamp at the bottom, I hold up the contract. Mike's secretary placed that one there. Amy's face begins to get pale. "What on earth is that?" she queries. Her smiles were finally beginning to show. I pretend to turn the pages and remark, "Oh, just a little clause. Look at this section right here. It declares that all joint financial commitments, including the wedding honeymoon and shared assets, are instantly invalid if one partner publicly humiliates the other before signing the marriage certificate." The visitors let out a collective gasp, similar to what happens in movies when the murderer is revealed. Amy is now blinking rapidly as if she's trying to wake up from a nightmare. "Hold on, what?" "It's not true. That isn't possible." "Oh, it's genuine." Using my inner lawyer, I say. Additionally, it mandates that the offending party publicly apologize in front of all of our visitors. At last, Tom stops grinning. "You can't be serious, dude." Isn't this a joke? I turned to face him, and I smiled broadly at him. "Yes, Tom, I do take pranks extremely seriously." "Amy is now perspiring since you were involved in the planning of this one. Her flawless makeup is starting to seem a touch sloppy. This is insane, darling." "Actually, you're not angry, are you?" I said the line at that point. Ever since I saw her with Tom at that coffee shop, I had been mentally practicing. What would make me angry? This is hilarious, Amy. I mean, it's all part of the pleasure. I loudly snapped the folder closed. I'm calling off the wedding altogether. Dead quiet. From the other side of the room, it sounded like a pin dropping. Amy's flawless grin breaks. "Hold on, what?" "Oh," I reply, tucking the folder under my arm. "Don't seem so surprised. You made your joke. It's my time now. The wedding is off." Whispers and gasps cause the room to literally erupt. The priest retreats from us as if we were both insane. At last, the bridesmaids stop laughing. In about 2 seconds, Amy's face changes from pale white to blazing crimson. She responds, "You're kidding," but her voice is suddenly trembling. "Am I?" I turn to face Dan. "Would you do the honors, man, Dan? He is an absolute legend." He takes out his phone, presses play, and drives off. Jack begins blaring from the speakers in the arena. Some visitors even burst out laughing. Others simply sit in disbelief. Some rise and begin to depart. Well done. In all honesty, Amy seemed on the verge of fainting. "Are you not being serious? You're not walking away," she says repeatedly. I simply smile. I really am. I look to my parents. For the first time all day, Dad seems proud, and Mom is genuinely smiling now despite her tears. We're probably done here. I say. My dad gets up right away and begins informing everyone that the wedding is ended. The pragmatic one always. My father. After that, I look back at Tom, who is attempting to gradually move away from the altar. "You like robbing people of their fiancés, don't you? Tom, congratulations, you have her all to yourself." At last, something removes the sneer from his face. Amy looks at him as she turns around. "Tell him it's dumb, Tom, but he's already on his way out." I believe I'm going to leave. The bridesmaids are actually all staring at their feet right now. Some of the visitors are laughing out loud. Amy too. Amy's entire world seemed to have fallen apart. "You can't simply abandon me in this manner." She lets out a scream. At the end of the aisle, I pause and make one more turn. "You're such a sucker for attention, Amy." "Congratulations, then. You understand." I left my own wedding after saying that. The following day was a wild one. Amy's missed calls and messages on my phone essentially blew up, as though we were exchanging hundreds of texts. She first gave off the impression that she didn't understand why I had gone, continued to say things as if they were jokes. "How come you're being so dramatic?" She then became irate and began writing lengthy texts complaining about how I had made her feel inferior. Isn't that ironic? And how she was shocked that I would spoil our wedding with a pointless joke. She even attempted to argue that I had no right to abandon her in that manner. This is where it gets interesting, though. Do you recall the group chat where they were betting, being the complete genius that he is, Dan had taken screenshots of everything from one of the bridesmaids' phones prior to our departure? Every message they sent regarding organizing this practical joke, every wager they made. They were even talking about methods to sabotage me in communications from months ago. Amy tried to play the victim on social media and tell people that I left her at the altar during the wedding. Then, however, those screenshots began to circulate. It turns out that turning someone's wedding into a gambling game is not something that people like. It had enormous fallout. When they saw that others could view their texts, the bridesmaids who found it hilarious began to freak out, because the screenshots were given to her prospective employer, Sarah. The maid of honor really lost her employment chance. I suppose they didn't want someone who found it amusing to make fun of others. The next day, Amy's parents gave me a call. Her mother was in tears as she said she didn't think Amy would do this. As it happens, they had told her not to be fanciful at the wedding. In fact, her father claimed he understood why I did what I did and apologized to me. Then came the financial part. Amy began requesting that I reimburse her for the expenses of the wedding. I had paid for nearly everything, so I laughed at it. My account, the catering, my card, and the location. She had been boasting to everyone about her lavish honeymoon. All reservations are made in my name. After making a single phone call to each location, everything was canceled. In fact, the venue management was really understanding. Claimed that although he had seen some bizarre wedding-related content, this was fresh. She was devastated by the cancellation of her honeymoon. She had already shared our incredible 2 weeks in Hawaii on social media. She had to tell everyone why she wasn't sharing photos from the beach. Her bridesmaids quickly began to distance themselves. When people realize they're going down with you, they quickly vanish, which is funny. Suddenly, even those who were aware of the entire situation didn't want to interact with her. Tom refused to return her calls or texts and utterly abandoned her. I suppose he no longer thought it was humorous. He was questioned about why he believed it was okay to disrupt someone's wedding. When her buddy Jen finally opened up to me, I could see how guilty she was. She was different from the others. She never found Amy's antics funny. I never participated in the group conversation. I never found it amusing to make someone seem bad. She said that she had been aware of the plot for weeks, but she felt compelled to keep quiet because of fear of Amy betraying her. She explained to me how she tried to caution Amy and pleaded with her to cancel, but Amy dismissed her, stating that it would be amusing to watch my response. Naturally, Tom had no trouble complying. Most likely believed that made him appear cool or something. However, Jen detested every moment of it. She informed me that the night before the wedding she didn't get much sleep. Knowing what was going to happen made me sick with worry. Additionally, she was unaware of the plan until she noticed me standing at the altar. She claimed that she froze when she wanted to shout to stop it before it happened. Her voice was low and remorseful as she said, as if she believed that I would despise her for not doing more. However, I noticed something I hadn't seen in months for the first time. Real common sense. Someone who wasn't content to follow the herd. Someone who was concerned about people's feelings. And to be honest, that was more memorable to me than the entire wedding fiasco. Amy arrived at my flat a week after everything had happened, looking as though she hadn't slept for days. Her engagement ring is still on. She broke down in tears as she expressed her regret. She didn't intend for things to go this bad. How she still cherished me. And we could make this right. I gave her an envelope just now. An invitation to a fictitious wedding rehearsal was enclosed. Our wedding was scheduled to take place at the same location and time. The list of guests. Everyone who witnessed her small trick. No name of the groom. We're even now just a note to that effect. Before she understood, she stood there and read it about 5 times. I just closed the door in her face as she glanced up. Do you recall all the phones that were recording throughout the wedding? Yes. Videos began to appear online. As a joke, people began referring to her as the bride who got abandoned. A meme was created from her own practical joke. Then additional screenshots would reveal how long they had planned this, how much money they bet, and all the nasty things they said about me in their group chat. Some of Amy's pals attempted to defend her online by stating that I should have handled the prank better. Every time someone gave me Amy's communications, they ended up seeing the screenshots as well. Amy attempted to contact me through common acquaintances, claiming she had learned her lesson. She eventually ran out of individuals who would stand up for her. Amy never really recovered from the wedding that never happened, and it has been 6 months since then. She persisted in attempting to re-enter my life by messaging me to promise that if I gave her another opportunity, she would make things better. As if chances were some limitless resource that she hadn't already depleted with all of her foolish antics. However, I was finished. She also lost her bridesmaids, the same people who shared her laughter. The maid of honor, Sarah, even texted me a lengthy apology, saying that she felt terrible about what happened to Tom too late, and that she should have told me. He began telling people that he was duped into the entire situation and barred Amy from everything. When I last heard from him, he had returned to his hometown and was now employed at his father's store. It turns out that the simple life wasn't all that horrible. Amy's parents continue to express regret whenever they see my family. In a Christmas card, her mother told me that she always remembers that day and wishes she had recognized the warning signals sooner. In fact, her father assisted me in selling the house Amy and I were planning to move into. The strange thing is that this entire chaos really produced something positive. I started going out for coffee with Jen sometimes, just to chat, you know. It turns out that Jen had been interested in me for some time, but she definitely kept it to herself since I was seeing Amy. Our time together increased. At first, nothing major, just work lunch breaks, perhaps going out to eat sometimes. Everything about her is different from Amy. Kind, yet quiet. Considers the sentiments of others. Never attempts to make fun of other people. 3 months following the nuptials. It wasn't. We formally began dating. She is adored by my parents. Even my sister, who detested Amy from the beginning, believes that Jen is the right person for me. Amy tried to create controversy online by claiming that Jen had planned everything and had stolen me from her after learning about us through common acquaintances. No one took her seriously. Any sympathy people might have had was kind of destroyed by the screenshots showing her plotting to embarrass me with her ex. Amy, by the way, is still working to repair her reputation. On Facebook, she posted a lengthy public apology detailing her growth and lessons gained. 2 days later, she attempted to approach Jen in the parking lot of my business. She had to be escorted out by security. Actually, I'm living a better life now. Received a promotion at work. This time a real one. It wasn't the one Amy ridiculed. Relocated to a new apartment in a more desirable area of town. I'm taking it easy with Jen. Last month, we took a vacation. Just a quick excursion to the beach. Nothing special, but it was good to be with someone who didn't feel the need to make a joke out of everything or share it all on social media. Oh, and the prenup folder is still with me. It was framed and given to me as a birthday present by my lawyer buddy Mike. I currently have it up in my home office. Jen finds it amusing. I escaped a gunshot according to my pal. I believe I escaped a whole firing squad. I can't believe I didn't see what was coming when I look at old photos of Amy and me. But when you wear rose-colored glasses, you know what they say. Red flags are just flags. The most peculiar aspect. In fact, I'm glad it happened. I may have been married to Amy if she hadn't shown her true nature that day. I might have put up with her jokes and pranks for years without realizing she was having an affair with Tom behind my back. I'm with someone who respects me instead. Someone who believes that love isn't about playing practical jokes, getting likes on social media, or making fun of your lover for amusement. That's where everyone ended up then. Amy lives with her parents and is still unmarried. Tom has returned to his hometown. The bridesmaids dispersed among the several states. And me. In fact, I'm content. It turns out that the finest things may occasionally come from the darkest day of your life.